The Guild is Maximum Lawyers' community of legal entrepreneurs who are taking their businesses and lives to the next level. As a Guild member, you'll build relationships, be held accountable, and learn strategies specifically designed to get you unstuck and accelerate your plan for growth. Members are also granted exclusive access to masterminds hosted around the country. Our next event is coming up, and we're heading to Scottsdale, Arizona. There's something truly magical about the power of these in-person connections where real-time breakthroughs happen. Picture this. You're surrounded by like-minded law firm owners tackling your business and mindset challenges together. The energy is electric, the insights are transformative, and the results are game-changing. Investing in yourself is the best decision you'll ever make. The knowledge, strategies, and breakthroughs you'll gain are priceless assets that will supercharge your practice and propel you forward. Join the Guild and secure your ticket to Scottsdale at the best possible price by visiting maxlawevents.com.
Welcome to the podcast edition of Maximum Growth Live, the #1 program for lawyers who want to grow their practices. Each week, our hosts, Seth Price and Jay Ruane, tackle the fundamental questions about how to grow the profit and profitability of your law firm. To watch the program live, submit your questions, and hear the latest episode, tune in every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern on Facebook for our live show. Maximum Growth Live is a production of Maximum Lawyer Media.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Maximum Growth Live. I'm one of your hosts, Jay Ruane, CEO of FirmFlex, your social media marketing agency for lawyers, as well as the managing partner of Ruane Attorneys, a civil rights and criminal defense firm here in the Constitution State of Connecticut. With me, as always, hanging out down in our nation's capital, is my man, Seth Price. Seth is founding partner of Price Benowitz, your DC, Maryland, Virginia, and South Carolina, as well as the creator and grand poobah and president. No, you're not the president. You're, what are you? The
founder.
CEO, founder. You're Blue Shark. Blue Shark, which sets the industry standard for high-quality lawyer SEO. And Seth, that actually brings me to my first question of the day. Well, the first question is, how's your week going?
Week's going good. Like we've been talking.
Yours is going better than mine.
Exactly, Jay. Every time I speak to Jay, another layer of the onion is peeled of something. But look, I feel like we have a lot of balls in the air, a lot of good stuff. We made some transitions I've talked about where we've upgraded some management and really, starting to like trying to leverage the systems. And every time, again, you're the king of systems. I feel like sometimes you're the king of one-offs, and every time we do a one-off, it's disaster. So the goal is to do less one-offs, more systems. I feel like I'm in that direction. So it's been a good week.
Yeah, it's funny. In our systems group, I've been posting some stuff about managing employees, how to check in with them weekly, how to do an annual review is actually going to be posted during the show. I set it up as a scheduled post. But one of the things that's crazy to me is just how many systems need to function well in order to have a really good functioning law office. I mean, there's so many things going simultaneously.
Absolutely. Let me ask you a question. So this literally just happened before we started recording. So, we had some updates in our intake for the PI department. It happens. It's always evolving. We had some management changes. And I noticed some stuff cracking where stuff wasn't being followed. So we're doing a meeting. And is there a system for this? The head of the team sent out an email to the team. We're going to do a meeting. It was 10 days from now. I'm like, why? It's like, oh yeah, somebody's getting a Moderna shot, this and that. I'm like, okay, why can't we just set the meeting, pick the next possible date, which would be tomorrow, when most people are in. If one person's out, you record it and you do it. But if you waited for perfect attendance for meetings, again, as your team gets larger, it may never happen. And the idea, not that you want to have a meeting without your constituents there, but the idea that as you get a team, and here you have a team of 14 people, like any given day, somebody's going to miss it for some God-owned reason. What I would like to do is have a process where the video is sent out afterwards, we record the Zoom, and there's something that's sent back that says, attests that they've seen it. That's the piece that I think I'm struggling with, because we have systems. We do lawyer meetings on a every 2-week basis, and there's certain stuff. We're trying to push certain processes and procedures that we've updated or changed, wanting to let them know when a system changes. And the problem that I'm having is What do you do when people aren't there, and how do you ensure that they get the full effect of that live meeting watched as a recording?
So let me give you some input on this. Back in my younger days, owned a piece of a bar. There were 20 of us who owned a piece of the bar, and we had a meeting every Monday night. And Monday night's meeting was mandatory. And if you didn't show up, you paid $1,000. And now this can't happen in your firm, right? And the reason being was these meetings are important to move the business forward. And so there were zero excuses. Well, you're on your honeymoon? Fine. Pay the $1,000. You can miss the meeting. And you know what? It got people there. But that's that's sort of an approach I take with the partners. If we're calling a partners meeting, there is no getting out of it, that type of thing. But when it comes to your employees, we go with the quorum, that Robert's Rule of Order. Do we have enough people here do we have 75 or 80%?
Let's assume you get 80%. It's not the percentage. It's the idea of you're putting this stuff out there. You're letting people know their new systems. Oh, I missed the meeting, as if it's gone and in a vacuum. And that's the piece, because then it's a negative incentive. You had the $1,000 there, but I have people that I need to get bought in. Usually the person you need most bought in is the person with some deadbeat excuse for not being there. And then the question is, how do you sort of do that checks and balances? The person's already, the weak link. Do you have some sort of, like, I wish there was some sort of sign,
So what we do in that situation is we record everything. We actually transcribe it. We'll send them the notes, and the notes will be on a slide, and you got to progress through all the slides. And at that point, they've gone. At that point, they could click furiously to get to the end to just click that I accept. But there's ways to track people's filling out a form.
I understood.
And on every page, they got to add something.
I need a slideshow for the transcription.
So what we do is we do a slideshow with a Google form, a slideshow with a form. What's your input on this question? Throughout the process. So if you got 15 pages, you're getting 5 responses. So they actually have to participate in the stuff, and it's just necessary, I think. I find, and it's taken a lot of iterations to get to that point. But when you have a disparate workforce, when you have a distance workforce, it just helps to make sure that everyone's sort of on the same page that way. The question I had for you was a digital marketing question. And it came up recently. Somebody reached out to me and wanted my opinion of something. I think probably only because they don't know who you are. Like, they don't know you personally. And they felt they know me from a criminal lawyer group, and they want to do it. So here's the thing. They came to me, they said, I love this idea of a 10-point client commitment. And I saw on another lawyer's website, and I want to put it on my website. And it's basically, I want to use the exact same language. Am I going to get penalized for having duplicate content from another person's website on mine? And here was my response. Number one, I don't think that's the duplicate content that everyone talks about, because duplicate content, from my understanding, is I have 15 pages on my website. Every word is exactly the same, but maybe the name of the town is different. Right? That's my understanding of having, just gaming it with a bunch of pages. But this client commitment isn't necessarily going to be something that somebody searches for, right? And if it's on somebody in Atlanta and somebody in Philly, the local searchers, it may be the difference maker that makes them call you because they read it and they like it, but it's not something that you need to rank for. So you don't really worried about having some content that mirrors something on some other website thousands of miles away.
That is duplicate content. No. That is, both are issues. But no, duplicate content does from another website. If you copy content, they're going to index their content, not yours.
Right, but if it's not something that I care, if I'm not caring if I rank for that.
Look, as an SEO nerd, I don't like it. My feeling is for 2 reasons. One is you shouldn't be ripping somebody off. It's one thing to emulate it and take it and sort of make it your own, but without permission, I just think it's bad form, A. And B, and they're going to see it, because when they run their duplicate content check, you're now the a-hole who placed it. So I think it's just wrong. Forget the SEO. I just don't think it's the right thing to do. Second is, make it your freaking own.
Okay.
Go and go and take it and don't just copy it. Look, you take somebody else's core values and you copy it verbatim. You haven't thought about it. Like, make it your own. Is it okay? So yes, it is duplicate content if it's the same thing from another website. Is it the end of the world if it's 10 little points within it? No, it's going to bring you down. It's certainly not going to, it's not good for SEO, right? It's not a good thing. It's a bad thing. But is it really meaningful if it's not? But if it's on your homepage, you don't want something that
it was going to be buried in the footer, that type of thing. They can reference
buried in the footer is different, but it doesn't sound that way. If you're doing a freaking 10 talking points, it sounds like something's going to be front and center. So look, first, stay away from duplicate content, period. It's not like it's this penalty that's going to wipe you off the face of the earth. It's not a good practice. Second, I'm going to take you out of SEO for a minute. It's just a dick move to rip somebody off without permission. Sure. If not right. And third, the whole point of this is that you internalize it and you believe it, not like, oh, that's a good idea, me too, but rather, what is it? And I'll give you the final one, which is you damn well better embrace that, because one of the things that I always got when I first started, I went to ethics lawyers and talked about, what you should have on a site or not have on a site. And one of the things they said is never have something like you should always or you must. Get rid of definitive terms. Because what happens if you don't do it? Now you've created liability, and you don't want that. So again, for all those reasons, yes, it is duplicate content. No, is it like the end of the world? But like, it's not a good practice. Should you be ripping people off? No. Like, emulate. Like,
change up the language, work it around a little.
Like, you don't, and at the end of the day, don't be an a-hole.
Okay, so that expands my understanding. My understanding of what duplicate content was having multiple pages on your website with the exact same thing, with an eye towards having a lot of pages on your website rather than
actually, that's second tier. What we're talking about there is the actual, most people think of duplicate content, which is from another site into yours. On your own site is a whole nother thing, because it would be great just to cut and paste and put the name of a town and have the same content. That's a no-go as well. So both are issues for different reasons, but neither are.
Well, that's a really good point. So, we have a lot of listeners and a lot of viewers out there who may, be in, just pick a random city, be in Philly, right? And they want to rank for Camden, and they want to rank for, Bryn Mawr or Westchester. They're looking for other towns around. So they might say, okay, this content looks really good for Philly. Can I just copy that, swap out the names of the towns?
Right. We talk about that a lot. No.
Yeah.
The answer is, and it sucks, because is the law the same in each of those next? It's the same, right? But get something localized. Talk about the courts. Talk about the jurisdictions. Talk about anything localized. Make it local so that Google sees this is a unique answer for this area. It's a bit of a game. I get it. And it gets worse if you're doing something like immigration, where the laws could be the same nationally. But you got to keep it original. You can't just cut and paste and copy. You got it. Like, Google is trying to say, hey, what's the best answer for this town? And in one sense, you could have this one beautifully written page. It's got to be localized, or it's not going to work the same.
So it's not even just mixing up the paragraphs. It's writing fresh content. It may have the same ideas.
Don't game it. Don't spin it. Like, that's the right answer. If you do that, you're going to, like, that way, every time the algorithm updates, you're not going to get hit for a thin penalty. You're going to have good stuff. That's why, 99 times out of 100, when something updates, I'm thankful, because it's getting rid of riffraff and putting our stuff further up.
It's funny. I did that years ago. I had like incredibly thin content. And what I did is I created a 5-page website and created town names in each of the in a sidebar menu. And when you would click on the town name, it would use PHP and spin up those 5 pages with the exact same content, but just swapping out the name of the town. So it was really a 5-page website that could look like it was a 1,000-page website. It crushed it in Yahoo
for a period of time.
For a period of time, you would Google me, and I would own like the first 50 days. Yeah, right. and then Google never touched it. Google never indexed it. And I was like, and it just got me nowhere. See now, Seth, that's just phenomenal news, and this is the kind of stuff. This is why I like having these conversations, because it's a lot of stuff that you need to know as a law firm owner. And one of the things that we need to know about and start thinking about, I guess, is the exit plan, right? Like some sort of strategy to get out of this. Because as I'm driving around, I'm thinking, when am I going to get off this crazy train? And that actually is somebody who we have today who can help us out with that. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who our guest is and what we're going to talk about?
This founder of the Law Practice Exchange. I didn't even know it existed till not that long ago. It's basically a marketplace for law firms. it makes sense. We see the stuff that's happening in Arizona and Utah, and clearly it's a trend happening across the country. It's frustrating because I see from the Blue Shark side, you make Inc. 5,000, the phone starts lighting up with people wanting to invest and buy and all this stuff. And it's pretty simple. You give them EBITDA, they give you a multiple, you negotiate, and then that's how you sell an entity. Law firms, not nearly as simple. I think that at the end of the day, what we're going to see is it probably is. It's just not nearly as sexy or as exciting as a non-legal, because of all the different nonsense we deal with.
Well, I think there's that, and I think one of the things that's unique about law that I don't think impacts you or I, but it does impact a lot of people, is that a lot of lawyers, their self-identity is wrapped up in their law firm because they think of themselves as a lawyer, and that's who they are, and it's their firm that they've created and crafted. And I think part of the problem with it is that tricky valuation. Because I'll be honest with you, I had a number of years ago, there was a lawyer who had all the chops but didn't have the business skills. And I said, hey, why don't you come in? I'll pay you a great salary, and you could run my litigation. And they were like, well, I'll be giving up my firm. I want my name on the door. I want equity. And I said, but tell me what kind of money you generated. Well, I have no idea because I get paid in cash every week, and whatever I get paid, I put a little aside for taxes, and that's it.
Well, but I was like, that's not the right. That's not the right guy.
Absolutely.
Anyway. So,
right. Absolutely.
But point is well taken. And look, and that's the difference. Like, it's when the firms are sold properly. It's not like this is a windfall of 20 years revenue. It sounds like, and I think that my general gist, I'm curious to see what Thomas would say, you get like 1 year's revenue as a payout if you're lucky, maybe 3 years of profits, something. This isn't the same, 7 to 10 times multiple of EBITDA that you see with non-legal. And part of it is there's all these things that are added to the mix that make us less desirous about
right.
And
you
have to deal with clients, et cetera.
And I think all of us are thinking, well, this law firm is so valuable over the last 30 years. I've made great money, but yeah, you have, and you've spent great money. There's a lot of dollars that run through our practices, but we don't put 100% of them into our pocket. We put a much lower, 20-25% of that into our pocket, and that also includes the stuff that we do. I mean, we're not, I know I'm not out. I know you're not out entirely, and it's one of the things that has to be replaced. So why don't we do this? Why don't we take a quick break? We'll hear from our sponsors, and then when we come back, let's talk to Tom. Let's talk a little bit about this. I got a feeling that this is one that could go long because this is something that we, you and I, have a lot of interest in, but I think a lot of our viewers do. So, folks, we'll be right back with more Maximum Growth Live.
The lawyers who will succeed in the next decade are the ones who are focusing on building their brands where people meet. And there is no place better to build your brand than on social media. With the FirmFlex DIY social media plan, hundreds of lawyers like you are using social media to build their brand and become the one lawyer in their community that people know, like, and trust. By spending even just 5 minutes a day on social media marketing, you can engage with hundreds or thousands of people in your local community who will need your services. By cultivating a network of followers, you build a book of business that you can market to the next decade and beyond. If you are looking for a solution to help you jumpstart your social media marketing, look no further than the DIY plan at getfirmflex.com. The DIY was created by a small firm lawyer for people just like you, helping you connect with local people online and build your brand and engage people in the topics they want to talk about, all for under $100 a month. To find out more, visit getfirmflex.com.
In this world today, if you want to grow your business, you want to grow your firm, you want to take on more cases and make a bigger impact, you have to have a digital blueprint. Statistically, throughout the time that we've been working with Blue Shark Digital, our law firm, the Atlanta Divorce Law Group, grew over 1,400%.
Seth and his team have years of experience in this area.
Blue Shark is truly a part of the firm, so I don't consider Blue Shark any different than the employees in my office.
We're thrilled to have Tom Lenfestey, the founder of the Law Practice Exchange. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You focus on an area that I've sort of was wondering if there was somebody like you out there. We had never really, found a person who was out there helping lawyers package their law firms up, get them sold, figure out, some sort of marketplace. Because, for most lawyers out there, they talk about selling their firm, and Lord knows in the circles we travel, Jay and I, more people talk about selling their law firm than anything else. But the number of success stories seems very nominal compared to the number of people that plan on selling their law firm.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason, back a decade ago, I started the Law Practice Exchange. As an attorney, CPA, I was working with a lot of other professional businesses, a lot of dentists, a lot of other CPAs, medical doctors, insurance, everything else. And honestly, Seth and Jay, I think I got jealous on the fact that it seemed like other professions had figured out how to, sell and retire, build value, monetize that value, and exit and transition it over. So that's really what kicked off the need, the idea, and, building it out into a service so that lawyers can do that. And that's what we've been focused on for, these years, is kind of building out how it can work successfully between a lawyer, law firm seller and a lawyer law firm buyer.
I noticed this as, Blue Shark, somebody said, hey, there's a lot of demand for marketing with dentists. And what I noticed was that most non-cosmetic dentists, essentially, they go to dental school, they may have dental loans, and they go out and they see a practice. They may work in it for a year or two, and then they get a note and they buy the practice. Now they have the advantage of there can be non-competes. You can sell your clients, there's a whole bunch of things that lawyers have restricting them, but it's a very clean way that somebody who's 3 years out of dental school can, with modest debt service, have a practice of their own. Something in the law firm world, Jay and I mean, half the reason our show exists is because people are trying to build this for the ground up, and there's not another option generally for jumpstarting a firm. So talk to me about, obviously that's the panacea, is that you be able to package stuff up. How much do the legal ethics rules surrounding non-competes and other issues stymie the ability to sell a firm?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the nicest part, if you look to ABA Rule 1.17, which most states have adopted, not all, but it expressly says you can sell a law firm, right? You can sell a law firm, and it's one of the places that, if it doesn't require, essentially allows for the selling attorney to sign a non-compete, right? So most states, on a national level, everybody says attorneys, you can't sign non-competes. But it actually, in order to prevent confusion, basically, the states don't want you to sell your firm to, Joe, and then turn it and open up shop right down the street. And so clients are confused, right? So they actually say, look, if you sell your firm, that is an area where we do not want you competing, right? Ethically, under that. So non-compete, I would say sale of a law firm or a law practice is the one area that you can have that for lawyers. But the ethics otherwise are still, not directly on point with how we really do the models. Most of our sales are transition-based sales. 1.17 kind of envisions a throw the keys to a buyer and walk out the door type of thing, which we just see as too much of loss of value, right? Those are death, disability, sudden departure type events. And so, the ethics are a restraint in some aspects, but it is one area where, ABA, most states have come out and said, look, you can sell your law firm. There is a model to do it. And it is an area where we can make sure that the clients are transferred without confusion and without competition from the seller.
In much of the non-legal world, sale of businesses go with a sort of a multiple of EBITDA. How are you seeing law firms sold? Like, what type of multiple of what are you basically pricing law firms at?
Yeah. So our multiples, we approach law firm valuation from 4 different methods typically. One of those, of course, is a revenues approach, looking at historical revenues. And then we talk about everything of, transferable value. So if you look at revenues, really, we're going to do an analysis to say, here's what the firm has done, right? But what is transferable to the next buyer? Because, what we find in certain situations, I mean, we may have a lawyer that does, expert witness work, highly lucrative, revenue producing, but the buyer can't do that work because that's going to be tied to that individual seller, right? Or there's going to be historical clients that won't transition, or, they're aging out as well as the seller. Revenue loss could be a component. But typically on revenues, we're looking anywhere from a low, which is a low of 0.5, up to a high of usually 1.1 on the revenue scale, right? And, the larger the firm, the more structured of a business model, you can really break those limits or push the higher ends of those. But that's typically from a revenue side, which means if you're doing $1 million in revenue for the firm and your multiple is a 1, right? Your firm value potentially could be that $1 million, right? That's the vision of what hopefully the buyer will do on an annual basis going forward. On the earnings side, or what we would call the net income approach, that really means what you have benefited from on ownership of the firm over the last couple of years. Is that, again, transferable to a new buyer, right? And so on those aspects, if we're looking at an adjusted, owner's cash flow or net income, we're usually somewhere between a 2 to 3.5 multiple, right? And, again, you're talking about, okay, $1 million firm, maybe you make, $500,000. If you're looking at that, 2 multiple, your firm would be worth, $1 million, right? 2
And
times
also,
the
it's not
total.
surprising these things should be coming together. There shouldn't be a huge difference depending on how you're looking at it. Before I flip this to Jay, I mean, Jay is Mr. Systems. Do you find that law firms, hope I'm not taking your question, Jay, but that law firms that have created that are taking these systems and putting them in place, does that make this more sellable, more likely that somebody could step in to take it over versus the guy who's been sitting there and doing stuff off the back of an envelope for 30 years?
Absolutely. And, Jay, to give you credit for your question, as well, but it's, the aspect of focus on systems, most traditional, especially small law firms, right? If you look at, a certain generation, the boomer generation that may be retiring or looking at retirement strategies, not all of them were built on a business model. They are an extension of, the attorney, right? And so much to your point, Jay and Seth, is, it's not systems. It really wasn't a business model. But those that have been built that way are so much easier to transfer from one to the other, right? Because the systems can be transferred. The people that are trained on those systems, right, can be transferred. It's much harder for us to show a buyer prospect in the marketplace. This firm's great. And let me tell you why, because the attorney that's selling it has all this information in their head, right? They do all these awesome things on a daily basis that produce these great clients and revenues, right? Or we can show them, hey, here's what they do on a marketing system and platform, which generates these number of leads, right? Here's the data. Hey, they have checklist or software process for everything here. Their, team is trained on that, right? They outsource this, but they in-house this. And so systems definitely help on a transfer or a sale. It's probably going to get you a better value. Overall, it's going to get you better payment terms, right? So we can definitely sell, the firm that is, circled around that attorney. It's just they're going to be more focused on a, performance-based payout. The seller's going to take on more risk than maybe the seller who has built a business that really runs without them in it, right? I mean, we've got some great firms that, the owners make great money and they haven't stepped foot in their corporate offices for 10 years, right? And they built a machine, right, that just, happens to offer great legal services. And they've got trained, experienced people and systems that can be seen by another law firm or a buyer of how they run those systems.
Well, before I throw this to Jay, are those firms where the principal is not essential? They haven't stepped inside the walls in years. Is that easier to sell in the sense that you clearly aren't relying upon a person, that there's a team that you're then would be theoretically acquiring that would be able to continue doing whatever they're doing?
Absolutely. It's easier to sell that firm, right? I mean, as a generic statement, than a firm that everything is centered around the attorney or even involved in that. I tell people one of the things that got me started, as I was helping clients and everything else was reading, John Warrell's Built to Sell book, right? I mean, we all know it, or read it, but it's the focus is basically if the business is about you, right? It's hard to sell it. You can go get a job somewhere, somebody will hire you. But if the business is fully, you're in every piece of it. So where you've removed yourself from that and you've been able to, still enjoy the benefits of ownership, then you're really saying, hey, somebody else, I don't need you to come in and I don't need to spend the next couple of years introducing you to referral sources, training you on these systems. Like that's built, right? So, and we see that mostly with, firms and attorneys that are retiring. We see those with larger firms, right? A lot in the personal injury, bankruptcy, workers' comp space, otherwise. But they've invested over the last 20 years and, built some really nice business models that, they still are a strategic, maybe overseer of it, but they are definitely not daily operations.
So I have a
Jay.
question for you. I'm thinking maybe it's time to sort of take myself out of the name of the firm, because I want to separate myself and be able to have a marketable entity or asset that I can sell down the line. Can we talk a little bit about, when a person is starting to set up their law firm, there is this natural bias towards, the ego of naming it after myself, Ruane Attorneys, Price Benowitz, because you are the firm at that point. But then I've seen other people, and I've done it myself with some of my offshoots, who've decided to go straight branding because they know that the brand is something that you can sell and it's a non-person based law firm. It's Advocates Law Firm or something along those lines.
And at the moment, that can actually help with Google search, given the local spam work. So it's ironic that right now that there's a double whammy. So I'm looking forward to this answer.
Yeah. So where should we be if we are thinking, even 5, 10, 15 years down the line, we want to be able to sell, should we be branding it or should we be rebranding as a generic name? Will that make it more marketable?
I think the short answer is typically yes, right? Okay. If you have a not generic name, but if you are really, have picked a name that you build, a brand around, right? And that's why, why do you buy a franchise versus starting your own, right? You're buying that brand, you're buying a marketing, somebody's driving down the highway and they see, that fast food chain, it. Right? You can recognize it, everything else versus, mom and pop's, diner or anything else. But, I do think as much as, there's an advantage to it and there's an ease of transition. Like when we talk about value of a law firm, we divide it up into personal value that the attorney owner may have, the firm value, right? And then we add to that the transition plan that is going to be needed by the seller to really take that personal value and transfer it over and take those three components. And hopefully that equates to what your transferable value to a buyer would be, right? You take what the firm, the website, the phone numbers, the systems, the trained team, and you take your personal worth, which is, who the brand, everything else that's tied to you. If you move more of that to the firm, it becomes easier to transfer. Less transition plan needed, just like building systems, and in our opinion would be, better because you're moving that from your head over to the firm systems or anything else. And so, I probably a little biased, but I would say if you can pick something that really works as a generic, not tied to your name brand for your firm, then it's going to help you, later if you decide to exit, transition, anything else. The old way of, having firm names, which were, 8 partners long, right? And now all firms have gone, the big ones have all gone to shorten those to just 2, right? And they used to be so-and-so and so-and-so, right? So they've tried to even take and say, we need a brand. Right? Like we need a brand that isn't tied to names. Plus every time the partner would, retire or die or change or leave, they'd have to change the firm name. So I definitely think there's an advantage. Now, that said, there are some tremendous brands that have been built around personal names, and those personal names are nowhere involved in the daily legal delivery of services. So I wouldn't, again, persuade anybody to change that, especially if they have already built, a brand or value around that. They just, wouldn't want to flip a switch and go the other way. But if you're starting, I would say definitely look at something that's not just tied to you.
And it can flip both ways, right, Jay? Because in one sense, you could say, yeah, it's easier to sell it this way. But if it's generic, it may be harder to brand it versus, I was just talking to a marketing client who had like a totally generic name. I'm like, I can't imagine anybody ever stroking a check to that name. Meaning it was versus, who are you getting? I know Ruane's going to take care of my matter, and that there's that balance. But I have a little bit of a rant, which is I went through this process, didn't know that you even existed. And over the number of years said, hey, we're going to grow through acquisition. Both used a consultant, did it myself. And the thing that I found, it almost felt like the Groucho Marx, Woody Allen concept of why would you want to be a member of a club to have you as a member, was that the people that I really wanted to acquire, if they weren't ready, the numbers were so crazy that you were like, that's just not right. And the ones that were ready had run things into the ground so far that, there wasn't as much left. They had sort of, I'll sell eventually. And by the time they were ready to sell, the systems were shot, the people were dead weight. And at best you might get some cases, but you'd have all these transaction costs of spinning that out. What are your thoughts on where do you find that sweet spot? Because it's like, I got to tell you, it wasn't intuitive going to market. There were plenty of people. I'll leave you with the story of a guy who, had bought out his partner at a $500,000 valuation 5 years before, run the firm down. And when he finally said, yeah, I'd be willing to sell it to you, I need a couple million in cash and, a tail going into the future. And I'm like, it just stopped the insanity. So again, there's a reason that you exist, and that there's, it would save somebody the time of all of these reverse tire kickers where they were just like waiting to be able to give you a dream number that they would love to get. Where do you find that sweet spot?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about one of our biggest needs is, educating our sellers, but, having reasonable sellers, right? Just like any other business, but especially, what I learned about migrating from law into, brokerage through the law practice exchanges. We have, owners of law firms contact us every day interested in selling. Then it becomes ours to basically filter through and say, okay, but can we really meet their expectations, right? Do they understand what the market, platform provides? And can we do that? Because, we work on a success fee. So if we can't do that, right, we don't want to work with the, one that you had that just bought out their partner for 500 now wants, a couple $1 million, right? Our goal is to make, bring on sellers that we can hopefully find buyers for, have reasonable sellers, have reasonable buyers. The biggest thing that, we've seen, Seth, is a challenge for especially small law firms is, lawyers that own and run the practices that are looking at exit. A lot of times they look at their total comp that they are receiving, and they forget that so much of that they are doing is tied to legal work, basically salary for the work that they're doing, right?
The person they'd have to replace, somebody's going to have to replace that work.
Absolutely. Right. And so, that's just part of where I'd say, especially recently, has been just a true education point for us of saying, look, yes, you may have that $1 million revenue firm and you may make $500,000, but you're a 30 plus year attorney, an expert in your field. What would you pay somebody to do all the legal work that you do? Right. And then immediately, of course, it's, 200, 300,000. Well, if that's the true replacement cost, then your owner benefits from the firm is only 200,000. Right. And so now we're talking about a multiple of, 200,000 times 2 or 3. Right. Because that's what if you and your firm are looking at acquisition, you can play with those discretionary cash flow numbers, right, after you've paid to have it replaced, and you can pay out of that. So you can make a payment of purchase price out of that. You can invest in the firm and transition costs. But that is a challenge, right? Unreasonable sellers, to make the deals work. And again, I think it's because most attorneys look at the total that they bring out of the firm. They don't really separate it out. And my best analogy is, if a law firm is a factory and you are one of those awesome machines in the factory, if you're going to retire and we're going to move you out, that factory is going to lose production unless it replaces with another machine, right? And it may take two machines, right? It may take two associate attorneys, with Seth's firm versus one expert that you've done everything right and everything else. But those are costs that a buyer's got to consume, right? So we got to move those off the table. That is a cost of doing business. It's not a profit, right? It's not a profit piece. So once we get that, we're pretty successful on making deals work and work successfully.
What about the transaction costs, just bringing the cases in? So let's say Jay wanted to acquire a firm, and something that I've seen is that the value of the current cases, while there's definitely a tail if it's a firm that's coming in, the amount of time Jay is going to need to take each file, which may or may not be in a case management system, may or may not be in his case management system, clearly not in Jay's, how do you bake that in? Because that's, I see people that like put the current value of the case almost at zero because of the amount of effort that it's going to take to bring them into your current system.
Yeah, I think, one of the approaches that I didn't mention that we take is usually an asset approach, right? Like if you're looking at current case inventory, whether it's whether it's, criminal defense, whether it's personal injury, workers' comp, those that have potential buildup, there's good to that, bringing in the cases, but there is cost to that, right? There's cost to complete those cases, but there's also like bringing them over on your system. Usually we like to figure in and work with our buyers on what is the transition cost, the transaction cost to onboard this firm and carry it over, right? And if you have a firm that's all paper files, right, and it's going to take you and your team, $50,000, $100,000, then we need to discuss that and make that part of the deal, that would be a reduction of price, because that's what it takes to move a, historical, very heavy personal value firm to a, process driven, more modern firm. So yeah, definitely we see that. We see a lot of hard files to, we see sellers that say, look, I've got offsite storage. I need a buyer to pay for that because I've got 20 years of files. And I said, our basic education point is buyers don't want to pay for file storage, right? They'll pay for the contacts, but you may be able to work with a buyer on a cost to have things scanned, entered into a CRM system, but they're not going to take over your 3-year lease on a file storage so that they can just have mountains of paper as well.
So I have a question for you, and it's starting to happen out west, Arizona, Utah, and outside money. Law is probably one of the last industries where there is no outside money in the United States really up until the last couple of months. But as things stand, it seems to go west to east. And where do you see this outside money as playing a role in the acquisition of law firms? Where do you see the future?
Yeah, I mean, again, I could tell you that when I started the Law Practice and Exchange in 2013, there was a belief that it would happen. I don't think that I thought it would happen even this quick, right?
Really?
But not in 2013 to, kind of, less than a decade later, see, equity, and kind of state laws change. And it's not just Utah and Arizona, but it's the, 15 other states that are, considering this move, right? In either publicly or super secret committee, right? That there is, those discussions. And once the dominoes fall, unless there's a catastrophic pushback in Utah or Arizona, states will change. And we'll go to what is, a lot of foreign models, everything else as well, that you could have private money, non-professional money into law firms. And, I tell people a lot of things, just, part of the reason of creating the Law Practice Exchange, I don't know that I have novel ideas, but I like to be a student of other industries or professions. And if you look at how, outside non-licensed, non-professional money has changed, dentistry, medical, right? Even CPA firms can be, owned by non-licensees, those different things. It's been a balance, right? Certain firms are still going to be owned 100% by the professional, and others are going to change over, right? I think overall it can be a good thing for the profession, right? Some people may not want to hear that, but I do think that there can be money that goes to providing better services to, clients across the board, whether those are underserved markets or their current served markets. You can help create a better platform where lawyers that have to self-fund or borrow just don't have the capital to implement a lot of the ideas and things that they would like to do to provide that better service, right? But you get an equity investor that can cough up $5 million, and that's not something the lawyer has to do. You can do a lot with that in a law firm, right? To provide great service, not just make money for yourself, but help others. The other thing I see too is, I'm sure if you guys again focused on systems, focused on people within those systems, non-attorneys are becoming so important in certain firms. That having them have, profit incentive or equity incentive, in those opportunities, I think is needed, because I do think the non-attorney managers, the non-attorney marketing roles are becoming such a key part that this, non-sharing of legal revenue, changeover will help attract the best, to law firms, right? Not just, those that will work for a base salary plus a discretionary bonus, right? So I see it changing. I could tell you that, Europe, the buying and selling of law firms is pretty much a marketplace that has been around for years and is very active, right? Most foreign jurisdictions are more active than the US. So I think from the buying, selling side, it will change. Right now, if you want to buy a firm, you have to self-finance that. You have to ask the seller to seller finance or do terms with them, or you have to go get a bank loan, right? At a certain point,
is that happening? Are you seeing bank loans for law firms?
Yeah, we've got great lenders, right? Similar to lenders again that'll lend for other goodwill structured companies like dentists, doctors, CPAs. We usually don't have any issue finding financing for, deals that, again, good firms, the right terms, reasonability otherwise. But again, that's the buyer or the firm taking on that risk, right? Anytime you could take somebody in and it be an equity partner and they're going to essentially put up that capital, to improve your systems, but then go out and acquire other firms to bring onto your systems, right? So Jay, you have an equity partner and then you're able to go out and acquire. Yes, you got a lot of paper files, you got costs to do that, but you don't have to self-finance that and bootstrap everything. You've got, deeper pockets to help you do that and hire the right team to do that. And overall, if you're proud of what service model and how your firm does things, then hopefully we're changing the profession for the better. Right? We're using that outside capital. We're still the ones directing as lawyers how those services are delivered, but it's not our pockets necessarily that we have to always pull into to fund those. It's, outside and kind of sharing that, opportunity.
So I got one. Let me ask this question. There's really sort of two ways to sort of sell your law firm, right? One is to go and find somebody who's not connected to your firm. And the other is to sell to your employees and sort of let them come in. In your experience, is one more successful than the other? Is one easier than the other? Is one more difficult because the owner who wants to sell to his employees never really let the employee know how much money was out there? And now the employees are like, well, shit, why do I want to buy your thing? I've been doing all the work for 20, 30 years. Like, you get into some interpersonal dynamics when you sell internally. I'm just curious, where do you find the problems on both sides, the internal sale and the external sale?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we started, we would separate. If somebody came to us and said, I want to sell to my associates or sell to an associate, we would take them down a one path, right? The problem that we ran into is that one path would kind of grind on, right? We'd run into, baggage history, right? They would tell us, oh, I love, this attorney's worked with me forever. they don't like to work that hard, right? They don't stay past 5 o'clock on a Friday, right? These different things, all of that history and baggage from employer employee would come up during the deal. And then a lot of times, and again, through no fault of the next generation, they don't all want to be a buyer. They don't want to be an owner, right? They don't want to have the sole risk, or they don't want to pay for it. They feel they've earned it, right, to a certain degree, or at least earned a discount. So, that's where and I always started as, I wanted to build the marketplace for buying and selling, right? Like, that's really the Law Practice Exchange's goal, is to be the marketplace where everybody can come to get the resource, but essentially do that because, if we can bring outsiders to even that small law firm, one owner, one associate, the associate may be promoted into a junior partner situation, maybe the geographical manager, but this other firm is going to take over the financial risks, the operations, everything else from that side. And timeline is so important to attorneys when they go to sell. Most of them are looking at retirement or exit for the next thing in their life. And when you spend months discussing and negotiating with your associate, non-equity partners, whatever the case is, and that doesn't lead anywhere, then you've eaten up a lot of your timeline, right? And so what our approach is, with clients now is, if you're interested in selling, we go through the same process. We value your firm. We prepare it for presentation to any buyers, marketing items, everything else, gather and bundle all that together, plus the sales structure on payment terms, whatever else. If you want to present, or you want us to present to internal candidates, fine. Those are, one or some of our buyers, but we also are going to market, because that allows us to make sure we're making the most of our timeline. And if things slow down or stall one path, we have the other path already moving, right? And what we found is, it is a challenge to sell to internal candidates, right? A lot of them don't want it, or there's just, financial mix. I don't want to share my profit and loss statements because they don't know what I've been making. So all of that is kind of just holds you back from really being fully vested. When we bring a law firm or a attorney from the marketplace, I tell everybody, it's like you meet them and it's a first date. Everybody's on best behavior, right? Everybody's nice, everything else. You don't have those years of, kind of baggage or anything else to do that. So it's more of an initial culture and an easier sometimes to make a match.
Right. And to that point, when you're selling internally, do you have an issue where, and Jay, I think sort of alluded to this, where there's the person buying thinks there should be some goodwill, that they were buying in, as in like the old idea, like you're working towards partnership, that there should be a discount provided because they've put their sweat equity in, and there would be a handoff. Very often there wasn't a person like yourself involved. So now there's an additional expense potentially, but what about that? Is there usually a discount? So you're preparing it either way, which I love, because you could say to somebody, look, the market values it at this. Do you usually see in the end some sort of a discount for people who have been there for a period of time?
Most owners of firms, most sellers want to provide that discount, right? I mean, they'll go and say, look, if this happens, I'm happy to discount it, to this, or provide more favorable terms or something of that. And yes, to your point, Seth, most buyers expect it, right? If they've been there for years and helped build the value, they're really a key part. They're not just, a part of the pyramid, so to speak, but they are, more level. They have their own clients. They have their own practice mix. Then absolutely, they're going to come and say, well, great, that's the value of the firm that you own. But if I left tomorrow, right, the value would be right.
So if I leave, then what are you selling? Gotcha.
Right.
It's more, then it's really more of a succession planning rather than a sale. It's still a sale, but it's a different calculus than, here is my widget that I'm selling to a third party and I'm going to get terms for.
Correct. Right. Now, again, if they've been an associate for a few years, they're just, great opportunities, but they really don't have their own book. If they left, then a lot of times there is no discount, right? You could be replaced without loss. And so, there would be no discount applied. But usually it's just a gratuitous, employer employee, hey, I'm happy to discount the purchase price by 5-10% because they've been with me for this long, right? Or because if they left, they would take these originations and, clients with them and everything else, right? So we definitely go through that, which again is a reason why if we can find a good strategic marketplace buyer, sometimes you'll get better, price, but also better payment terms, right? They can use, seller, outside bank financing, so you get more down payment at closing, those different things.
So what are the things? I mean, I know we're starting to go long, but I want to, we talked on some of these terms, but Jay is sitting here. He's saying, hey, in the next 10 years, I want to sell. What's the checklist that you want to come up with in order to prepare yourself so that you would be in the best shape when you're ready?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't think Jay needs to hear this, but my first recommendation would be to start delegating everything you can to, people within your firm, your team, or to systems if you don't have maybe a team, maybe you're a solo otherwise, or, to the people and systems within. So, because your goal is to lessen the need for your knowledge, your expertise, your relationships, the personal value that you have, Jay, right? You don't want that to be such a deciding factor for a buyer, right? The other part is, again, prove yourself on the financials and the data that supports them, right? So strong revenues, strong earnings, built on systems, everything else, and the data to track to say, look, these are, the leads that we get in from these different marketing sources, these different funnels. This is our conversion rate. This is our intake. This is how we do things. That's all going to help prepare, right? For that eventual.
When you say earnings, do you mean profitability?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When I saw, when I looked on your site, there was a lot about, what the revenue was at. And sometimes it mentioned how much somebody was taking home, which can be dicey, especially for a smaller firm where the firm is running a ton of stuff through the firm. But where's profitability on the list compared to gross revenue?
Yeah, absolutely. So we use both when we look at, value for a firm. Profitability, we really use, Seth, as I'll call it a stress test, right? We'll do our, return on investment, cash flow projection. So if you value a firm at $1 million, but the earnings on the firm is, 200,000 just because it runs on, heavy cost or otherwise, then that deal probably doesn't work, right? For $1 million. The price is too high, for that firm because a buyer, maybe like yourself,
Gotcha.
won't see the advantage in it. So, we use earnings from a multiple factor for valuation pricing, but we also use it to test, our cash flow projections, going forward, post-deal, right? Post-sale type of terms from that aspect. So, again, earnings are the benefits of ownership, basically the profits that you receive, not necessarily what you pay yourself for the legal work you do.
Gotcha. And then one of the things you mentioned, which brought me back to sort of my journey through this area with sort of non-rational buyers, which I love, which is if a bank would lend on it, you got to think that the terms are sort of standardized. And my dad, who was he was a lawyer, but did deals for non-law firms, buying and selling small family businesses over the years. I always came away with, just sitting down at the dinner table, that if you didn't get your money up front, there was a good chance you weren't getting the rest of it. And so as like a truism, but it seems like that very often people are talking past each other, just sort of like a lawyer that gets a down payment and knows they're not getting the rest of it from sort of a client on the edge, that when a deal is structured right and it's a win-win, that makes sense. If it's a gouge and you're waiting for future payments, it will eventually end in litigation of some sort. I assume that's part of your role, is to bring some sort of a marketplace to this, where it's not just some guy saying throwing this multi-million-dollar dream out, but saying this is what it can support. Because if it supports it, in theory, and the firm buying as a rational player, they should be able to, monetize that in such a way that payments will be made, versus if something is so lopsided, you get in, you dust off these paper, files, and all of a sudden you're upside down, much less likely you're going to get paid anything beyond the initial upfront payments.
Yeah, absolutely. Our goal in building the marketplace is to do deals that work for, the seller, but also going forward for the buyers. I mean, we want our buyers to be not just one-time buyers, but multiple, right? If you're going to buy a firm, we want you to come back and, through our model, through our help, do another one. And so again, that goes back to seller education, making sure that we can do that. On payment terms, we always talk about, a mutual sharing of risk. The market definitely operates with most firms based on performance structure, or what a lot of people call earnout, right? It's, hey, you'll get a percentage of revenues over time. CPA firms operate very similar, right? Earnout structure, everything else, because it goes back to, do those relationships, will those clients stay, right? Especially if you've got more personal value tied to you, and you're going to help, introduce at Rotary Club, at the Chamber of Commerce, right? Go through that different thing. So earnouts there, what we try to get most deals to is a sharing of risk model. If the buyer's willing to go and use cash they have, or use, outside financing for a down payment, even if it's a 50-50 deal, if you go and you value a firm at $1 million and you're willing as a buyer to go out and, contribute cash and borrow $500,000, hopefully, right, you've thought through it that you're not going to lose $500,000 of value, right? From that aspect. The other $500,000 may be, variable seller financing or an earnout component, where the seller now is very invested in making sure that that post-sale transition plan, is successful, right? Takes you to Rotary, takes you to the Chamber of Commerce, has, lunch when we were having lunch as, normal human beings and everything else. But those different things. And we're okay with that, right? As part of it. And we talk a lot in due diligence on our deals about creating that transition plan so that a seller and a buyer are comfortable prior to closing on how that's going to work, because we want our sellers to be very comfortable that, look, I'm not just selling this for, $500,000 when it's really worth $1 million and I'll never see that. They want to feel very good that, hey, look, I know this firm has built good operations, has good people, is going to be great stewards for my clients, my referral sources. There's a great plan to do that, and it is going to be successful. And then, as I tell everybody, again, we're success fee motivated is the way we get our fees, and we typically earn with our clients. So we're very motivated on this side as well to make sure you're choosing the right buyer, that it is going to be successful, right? So anyway, but yes, we can work with terms and structure, but we want to make the deals work for everybody.
I have a quick question. It may not be that quick when I ask it. Have you seen practice groups splinter off, and so just a practice group of a firm, or is it basically an all or nothing situation?
So we've definitely seen practice groups. Different states vary on, can you sell just one practice area versus, the whole firm itself. Like I think California revised their version of 1.17 to basically say it's an all or nothing, right? You can't just sell it. Now that said is, practice groups are bought and sold all the time. To the outside world, you see it as, this attorney has left to go join this firm, right? Yeah. And they're joining as of counsel, whatever else. Behind the scenes, whether we're part of that or not, there's been some kind of financial transaction which says, come join us, we'll pay you, right, this for, legal work, but we'll also pay you over time for the clients and the goodwill value that you bring. But to that, if you're a firm that's doing, multiple and you just want to get rid of an area, you can do it. It's a little bit more challenging depending on state ethical rules. And typically you would kind of dance into a co-counsel of counsel and then, full transfer. So we can work the financials to make it work, but it just takes maybe a kind of a incremental steps to get it over there.
It's interesting to me. We talk about building systems. We talk about doing, every lawyer that I talk to, just wants it to work. They want to sort of have this magic wand where they can hire staff, they can do things, but they don't necessarily want to do the work to build systems. And it sounds like a lot of lawyers want to sell their firm, but they don't necessarily want to do the work that it takes you to be able to just sell the firm type of thing. So I think that one of the takeaways I got from this was you got to put in the work early on in the process to make it easier on the back end. It's fair to say?
Absolutely. I mean, even when we start our process, our attorneys who say, I want to sell, I'm ready, let's go. What do you need? And we say, okay, we need, 3-5 years of tax returns. We need P&Ls. We need, employee. Geez, do you really need all this stuff? Right. I mean, it's well, this is going to take some time, those different things. Yes. Right. We'll make that process more efficient. But to your point, Jay, yeah, put in the time and efforts, right? If you are looking to sell your firm in 5-10 years, then start putting in the steps and efforts now through, help through your guys' community and otherwise, to implement that, because your firm will be hopefully a higher value, easier to sell, find a more attractive, good fit buyer, and kind of move through those things. But it does take the effort and the time commitment to do so.
What are we talking about time-wise from the decision of, yes, I want to sell my law firm? Is it normally 18 months, 24 months, 9 months? Like what's I mean, I know you can't get specific, but what should somebody be budgeting in their head for, I decide today that I'm going to list something with the Law Practice Exchange. What should I be looking for in this time commitment before I can say, I'm out?
Yeah, we tell everybody, if you're looking at, exiting the profession or getting to a point where you really are not practicing law, get to us at least 3 to 5 years ahead of that point, right? So if like retirement,
so that includes the sale and the post.
You're right. It includes that window. So I'm sitting here today saying, in 5 years, I want to be done practicing law. Then that's the time to really start, planning for sale and exit. And to walk through that, if you come to us today and sign up with us, it'll take us, 30, 60, 90 days, because again, we got to get financials, everything else to get you into market, to prepare pricing, structure, marketing materials, strategy to do that. And then, we sign up for basically a 12-month kind of window, because it takes a while, right? I mean, if you're an attorney located in this certain community of a certain practice area, our biggest things are geographic location and practice area match, right? We can have somebody that says, oh, I'm looking in this geographic area, but not this practice, area, right? And so we keep moving on. So as this market builds, our biggest asset probably, aside from our process and knowledge, is our database, right? So we continue to build those buyers who are interested, everything else, to make those match. But that could take a year, right? To find the right buyer, to negotiate that deal, hopefully close on that deal. Could take longer, could take shorter. But now we're, a year into this, and then we tell everybody on the seller side, plan on at least 6 to 18 months of post-sale transition, right? Which means, hey, you've sold your firm, maybe you stay on as a partner by name, or you've joined and kind of, as part of the sale, you're of counsel now with a firm. That first 6 months, 12 months, you may be working pretty hard to transition stuff over. And then after that point, you're needed for Rotary Club. You're needed for this key client or this key referral source lunch, right? So you're very much part-time, but you're still working. You're still doing that, right? And openly, most of the problem that we see, of the generation of sellers, of the boomers otherwise, is they don't really want to stop practicing law. They just know they need to have a plan for ownership transition. And to them, we essentially say, selling your firm does not mean you have to stop practicing law. Right. So I would imagine, Seth, if you've looked and talked to some of those potential sellers, if they said, well, I'll sell the firm at good, reasonable terms, and then I'd like to stay on and be an attorney with your firm, right, going forward under a compensation model, most of the time you'd say, great, wonderful. Picks up a good personal brand, has somebody to do some of that legal work. But they
you
then
have the rational. You found the rational sellers. I have not. That's why you're
Wow.
you. We're going to put your information, your contact information, in the comments. My final question, as we get out of here, is what are the economics? What should somebody expect? How do you guys work? Is there an upfront fee for putting the package together? It's great to hear that you do your percentages along the way. Is it a set amount, or does it depend on the deal? How do you work?
Yeah, typically we just charge what we think fairly small amount, depending on the firm, upfront to do the valuation, right? And just the initial market prep. Really, we do that because we want to go into that and say, here's the price, here's what we think we can get for you on terms, price, everything else. What do you think? And if the seller says it's way too low, then that's where we stop, right? We've been compensated
what's
a
the
little bit.
valuation run ballpark, high to low? What's a range?
Yeah. Depending on ours, on a low side, 3 to 4, right? On a high side, 10, right? And we're doing these as, pricing, market analysis, type of things, depending on the ownership structure, size of the firm. But, typically
does that
on that,
include like an accounting? Do you bring an accounting firm to run the numbers, or how do you do that all in house?
We do it all in house. So we have, myself, of course, being a CPA, we have other CPAs on staff to basically build out all our own models. As you can imagine, there's just not a lot out there about, market pricing of firms, right? And then
Understood.
the payment structure. So, our data. And then really, on success fee, the standard's 10%. Of a success fee. It varies. If the firm's larger, it'll scale down usually from there. But for our goal is, that 10%, standard brokerage, for business type model. And again, our goal is we earn with you. So if you get 20% down and 80% is paid over time, but you really like the buyer, the firm, you feel there's a great fit, a great stewardship of what you've built, then we'll ride that with you. And we'll help throughout that process to make sure that you guys have talked about what's the transition plan, right? Is there, set dates for how you're going to introduce to key clients, referral sources, make the right announcements, bring resources to them.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Well, thank you so much, Tom. This has been illuminating.
Yeah, it really has. This is something that we talk about a lot, but I don't think people really know the steps that are necessary. And getting to talk to somebody like you is really helpful to sort of frame it out in our minds. Now I want to see what I can do to get out of the.
Yeah, JJ's already delegated 20 different things, and he'll have the firm on your website within a week.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
Good deal. Well, I appreciate
Tom.
it, guys. And anything I can do in the future, let me know.
All right, folks.
Thanks so much.
Folks, thank you so much, Tom. And folks, we'll be right back with more Maximum Growth Live. All right. That was
Thanks,
awesome.
Tom. I got.
Hey, it's Becca here. I'm sure you've heard Jim and Tyson mention the Guild on the podcast and in the Facebook group. The Guild is this perfect mix of a community, group coaching, and a mastermind. Guild members get so many benefits, including weekly live events and discounts to all Maximum Lawyer events. Head over to MaximumLawyer.com/the Guild to check out all the benefits and watch a few testimonials from current members. So head to MaximumLawyer.com and click on the Guild page to join us. Now, let's get back to the episode.
Well, now, Seth, I mean, this gave me a lot to think about, especially that last part about the timeline. If I want to exit in 5 years and be totally out, I need to start thinking now. And as I think, when do I want to get out? That at least gives me a roadmap to where I think I want to be. And knowing someone like Tom is out there, I think is going to be helpful because I have now a resource I can go to start putting things in place. What were your takeaways?
Look, a lot of it's it is common sense. I think it is what we've spent a lot of time on this podcast talking about, which is running your law firm like a business. And the more you run it like a business, the more sellable it is. Now, it's, this is somebody who sold several dozen firms. It is still not an easy thing to do. But what I also see, having gone through the process without a Tom, but with somebody else, with a person who is trying to make these introductions, is that there are so many lawyers that sort of they say one thing, and we're all guilty of this, but they do another. How many times you said, I'm going to get out of going to court more often, and then it doesn't happen for whatever reason. Some parts because you like it, some because you think it's business development, some because the guy you need going there isn't strong. Whatever it is easier said than done to set yourself up for it. And I think that is the key. What Jay Ruane can do without Jay Ruane is what's sellable. And until you get to the point, the systems are great, everything else is great. But if you're indispensable, then it's not a business to job. I always talk to David Brenton about this when he's like, I'm going to just take care of this issue. I'm like, stop it. I had to stop myself doing it. Now I have the president of Blue Shark has to no, unless it can be done by excellent staff who knows what they're doing, then you've just bought yourself a job and it's not a business. And I'm always and I think that it's not different here. It's never going to be, it's always better if you do it yourself. But until you get to the point, you have the ability to put the systems in place, but until you make the hires and put talent in place, it doesn't really allow you that ability to make the exit. And we would be curious, I'd love to follow up with Tom, of the successful sales. One thing is obviously expectations. We heard that loud and clear today, right? If you think you're getting 7 times earnings, that's not happening in a law firm. Put that aside. But of the people that were sellable, how many of them had made themselves non-essential? Because without it, it's one thing if you're doing the work, because then they can put another practitioner in to do the work. But the people that have everything tangled through them as Grand Central Station, probably less likely to have sold. And the people that did do and follow the things we talked about today, probably much more so.
And that begs an interesting question too, is what is the value of somebody who is somewhat of a visionary? Because a person who buys a practice, that practice may be humming along, but it may not necessarily grow. I think one of the things that I bring to the table is I constantly have ideas. I'm trying something now we're talking 6 months before I think I'll be able to even share information, because I want to run A/B tests and do a bunch of things. But I just had a crazy idea one night. But you're
still in the position, you're not selling anything. So the question is, when Jay Ruane is tireder, we may get older. Seems to most people seem to get older and more tired. When you get to the point where it's not there, the question is, can you hand it off? And that's why when I look at the dental practice, there's a methodology. You run your piece, but you're on your feet all day. At X age, the over under maybe 65, at some number, maybe 62, you're going to sell it. You're going to get a couple years of revenue from it. You banked money before. That's how it's done. And that you sort of it's tried and true. Lawyers have just basically run themselves to the ground. Same reason we have the different mental health issues and alcohol issues, right, and all these things. There's not a schedule to get off the treadmill. The people that go into it because they're so focused and determined. It's sometimes, I think, hard to jump off that treadmill and get yourself to the point where okay, what is next? When do I head to Boca?
It's funny. I was at a dinner last week for a lawyer turning 60, and I was the youngest lawyer in the room. Obviously, I'm only 48, and there were in the room with me 12 lawyers over 75 who still practice and have no plans on walking away from it. My dad, 85, still practicing, right, in New York, of counsel. But that's why the big firms with succession, the mega firms, they have mandatory retirement. Right. And for a mega rainmaker, they may get a 5-year extension, but or even a 2-year extension, but generally it's up and out, and they know that the work's got to go somewhere. They assume more often than not it'll stay at their firm, but they don't want the people to stay there forever. That there's for a bunch of reasons, but the question for us is it and this is a larger discussion for a future episode. Is the law firm a lifestyle mechanism of earning for you, or are you building something to unload? Most people treat it as a lifestyle. Most of the people in our audience who have their own shops, they run a lot of personal stuff through their firm. They make it into something that's part of their being and their DNA. And so what we talked about today is a whole different mindset. And usually what happens is, and my guess is, and he alluded to this, a lot of people come when it's too late. Yeah. It's interesting.
We acquire. Yeah, sorry.
It was interesting about the whole lifestyle thing, because I didn't get to bring it up in the interview, but I remember talking to Lee Rosen a while back, who had been traveling for years while his firm was sort of just functioning without him. And when he sold it, he said, I didn't really budget in for the fact that I wouldn't have the frequent flyer miles anymore. That, because he was living in hotels and getting upgrades and all those things. And that disappeared when he didn't have a law firm churning those American Express or Chase Sapphire miles for him. And that was something that he had never even thought about as part of his lifestyle that was necessary. And so I just thought it was something that was interesting, that, a lot of people, they'll run their cell phone through the office, and their car payments are company cars. And when you don't have the firm anymore, you don't have those as expenses. So it's something that you have to think about. There's so many variables to getting out. But I definitely don't want to be that person who has a heart attack at their desk. And it gets. Well,
I don't wish that upon you. But if I had to give an over under of who's still working after 80, I have a distinct feeling it might be Jay Ruane.
Hell no. Hell no.
This is a movie.
This is let's put some money on it.
Back and forth. How about bagel and lox at the bagel tree?
I was going to say I want a Bitcoin. Let's each buy a Bitcoin now, and if I'm still working at 80, that I'll give you my Bitcoin. But I know you said you don't want to gamble that much. I've been with you in Vegas. I was just talking to some friends about how we were at Legacy Stadium for your 50th, and I got there at 7 o'clock in the morning and stayed there till 8 o'clock at night watching football and gambling all day. And you must have come in and out of there like a dozen times because you couldn't sit still. You watched the Giants game, and then you're like,
no. This was the thing about Legacy, which is it's such a fun spot. But it is like when you're there with your friends from your entire life shows up in Vegas. It's everybody wants to go in their own direction. But that was a great trip. 52 this October after MTMP.
Wow. Jeez, people are looking for trips. So is that it? You're making the announcement now at the Seth Price birthday party is in Las Vegas. We can't go back to Legacy Stadium. COVID knocked it out. It's gone forever, which is a shame.
They'll put something back.
Oh, I'm sure they will. Okay, folks, so we've gone long. We've gone really long this week, but I think you got something good out of it. Of course, you can always catch us every week, every Thursday live here at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific on our Facebook page, as well as all the other Facebook groups that we're syndicated to. If you don't want to watch us live, if you want to take us on the go, our show is always syndicated through the Maximum Lawyer Podcast, or you can download Maximum Growth Live wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to get other information about the duplicate content issue we talked about at the top of the show, Seth's on his Blue Shark page and on his own pages has the SEO Insider, where he really interviews and talks all about topics just like that with some of the movers and shakers in SEO. And it's amazing to me, somebody who's sort of bounced around the fringes of that industry over the last 20 years, to see the names of people that you're getting on that show. I mean, we're talking people who, I followed on Twitter, I've seen speak at seminars, and you've got these conversations are just phenomenal from just a knowledge base, and there's really no agenda there, which is phenomenal. So I highly recommend that you check it out. Of course, folks, be sure to sign up for Maximum LawCon. That's coming up this October. I know, Seth, you'll be presenting. I know I'm going to be presenting. That's going to be a phenomenal show. And, of course, if you want to talk more about the role of systems in your practice, be sure to join our Systemizing Your Law Firm for Growth Facebook group. We're happy to have you. Every week I post different systems. This week and this month we're doing a lot of stuff about how to manage employees. So that's it all for you folks today. A lot of good stuff here. Please make sure you watch this again. I'm going to go back like I do most weeks and take an audit of everything that I need to work on. But there's some great stuff. Seth, any parting words for everybody?
Just have a great week, great weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Awesome. Folks, thank you so much. This has been another edition of Maximum Growth Live with Seth Price and Jay Ruane. We will see you next Thursday here on another edition of Maximum Growth Live. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to Maximum Growth Live. Please remember to subscribe to our podcast for the latest episodes and tune in live on Facebook every Thursday for our live show. For more information, visit Maximum Growth Live on Facebook or MaximumLawyer.com, and be sure to share us with your friends.